All right. And now we are on Facebook, and there we go. Hello to everyone. Welcome to History Matters, and so does coffee. Um, Today we're talking about a topic that someone at some point sent me a message when I announced it and said, "Your favorite topic, Joanne," and it is true. I love talking about technology and democracy. I do. And when there's an actual reason to do it, I get very happy. So that is what I want to talk about today. But before I plunge into that, I turn to my partner in crime, Annie, who will explain the rules of the game.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Annie Evans from New American History, and I work with technology and democracy every day. So I am really looking forward to this. We have a very robust chat going, as we always do on Friday mornings. But if you're new to us, this is how it works. Joanne's going to talk for about 30 minutes. And if you have a great question about today's topic, please put that in the Q&A. The chat goes way too fast for us to keep up with, so I will be looking for those questions in about 30 minutes, and then we'll have a discussion. I'll see you in a little bit.
Okay. And I should add, anyone who is here for the first time, please in chat, tell folks that you're here for the first time, because we do have not just a robust chat, but a robust community of people here that has built up over the previous 228 episodes. This is the 229th episode, which I never remember. So I'm very proud of myself, and I'm not fully caffeinated yet. But do tell folks if you're here for the first time or the second time or something, because you will get a rousing welcome from the History Matters community. Okay. So as I was saying a moment ago before we officially began, technology and democracy. I'm fascinated eternally by this. I always have been, not even, I mean, it involves my most previous book, my last book, The Field of Blood, but generally speaking, I find it fascinating because it's like real-time changes happening in the working of democracy. And we can watch that process work itself out. We can watch people figure out how to take advantage of technology. I find the whole thing fascinating, I suppose in part because the period of time that I focus on in my work is a period when they are so the late 18th and let's say almost the first half of the 19th century, right? But particularly the late 18th, early 19th century. They're figuring everything out politically, often, again, for the first time. They're coming from monarchy, they're moving into a republic, a democratic republic, and they're not quite sure how things are supposed to work, and they're figuring it out, and they talk all the time, happily for me, a historian, and you people reading history, that we don't know what we're doing and we don't know how to do it, and maybe we should try this and maybe we should try that. And that's wonderful for people to attest in evidence from the time period to themselves figuring out the ins and outs and the pluses and minuses of how things are supposed to work. So that kind of improvisational nature of things that I'm always find fascinating about my time period, in a sense, we're getting a sense of that whenever we see people figuring out in real time how they can adapt and use technology to advance a political cause. So that's part of what sparked what I want to talk about today. In particular, I think the fact that got me going is next week is the Democratic National Convention, the 19th, I believe, through the 21st. And it's going to be streamed all over the place. It's going to be on TikTok, I believe. It's going to be on Instagram. It's going to be on YouTube. It's not just going to be a matter of turning on the TV and turning to whatever channel you want to watch it on. It's going to be all over the place in a variety of different forms on a variety of different platforms, which again, I find fascinating because clearly part of what they want to do is have a generational reach. And the assumption is, that it might be older folk like me and others like me. I don't consider myself older or old, but still, I suppose now I'm in that demographic. Um, aren't Younger folk are not going to be as likely to turn on the TV and sit down to watch the convention. So now it'll be available all over the place. And I have no idea how that will go. I'm assuming it will go wonderfully because of the enthusiasm with which everyone is sort of launching into this, and what I'm going to talk about in a moment as well, this sort of Zoom conversations that the Harris campaign, and actually not just the campaign, but others around, supporters, are organizing these Zoom conversations. But here we are in a moment where there's the Democratic Party is kind of morphing or shifting. The strategy and the tone and the mode of um, politicking and electioneering from the Democratic Party is really in a different place. They're actually poking fun, and in a way that in my lifetime, I don't think I've seen the Democratic Party do. That normally they're the sort of, we stand for the institutions and for going high when they go low. And now we have people not necessarily going low, but just sort of laughing back. That's new. So this goes along with that sort of new mode, new tone, new ways of campaigning and electioneering. And we're watching it be figured out in real time. Now, part of that happened initially with all of these Zoom conversations. I think it was like Black women for Harris, Black men for Harris, white women, like Hear the Call or something. I don't remember what that name of that was, but and there's been any number of other things, right? White men. I think someone said that there had been or was going to be like, cat ladies, um, any number. You fill it in and there'll be a group. And I suppose yesterday maybe was Jewish women maybe for Harris. I don't know. I missed that. That actually touches on an interesting point about this. And I mentioned it a moment ago, right when we started. There's a generational component to this that's deliberate, meaning I'm sure the Harris folk are thinking we can reach younger people with all these different platforms and all these new technologies. But I have a good friend who's much older than me, and she doesn't know about any of this, right? It just doesn't cross literally her screen, right? She just doesn't see it in the same way that whatever, wherever, and however the Jewish Women for Harris thing happened, right? I didn't know it happened until after it had happened. So it's also true that there's a generational component that probably affects people who are less likely to be aware of this. She keeps, whenever I mention to this friend of mine, oh, there was this whatever, and she keeps saying, how do you know about these things? Like, I don't know. I mean, just sort of onlineness. But anyway, so in a variety of different ways, interesting generational components here. But technology and democracy, always interesting. And watching that evolve in real time, I think is particularly fascinating. And I've said this before. I'm going to say it again because it's still true. That democracy fundamentally is a conversation between the people, the citizenry, the American people, and the people who they give power to, politicians, power holders. And any technology that shapes that conversation shapes democracy. And that's been true, over the course of American democracy, that conversation changes in some way, and the mode and nature and impact and power of particularly the people, but both sides of that conversation can vary. And that's what we're watching now is new power coming through new ways of using technology. And certainly one of the ways in which, and I don't have facts and figures here in front of me as far as how many millions and millions and millions of dollars the Harris campaign has gotten through doing this Zoom campaigning, but it's a lot, a lot really quickly. So again, real time learning that this really works. Now, one fact and figure I did find in advance of coming on here, and I didn't know, and I don't know if this makes me feel at ease, but I'll offer it to you anyways. It's supposedly, according to the Pew Research Center, roughly 1/3 of Americans between 18 and 29 get their news regularly on TikTok. Now, I'm not even on TikTok. So if you're talking generationally, I've just thrown myself into the older demographic, but I didn't know to that degree that it was being considered a news source. So the Harris campaign's way ahead of me and probably most people my age on that one. It's supposedly this will be the first midterm cycle in the TikTok era. It became, oh no, I take this back. Won't be the first, but it became popular in the United States until the fall of 2018. So it's not that long ago. And now it's going to have who the heck knows what impact watching this convention. Supposedly, there was even a special I don't know what I want to call it, meeting for people who were TikTok influencers to teach them, sort of how to make use of this and what to do or not to do. So again, we're in some kind of interesting realm here that's certainly beyond anything I have access to, but that I find really fascinating. Now, the first moment that sort of set me off on this path was actually in 2016. And that was during a gun control sit-in in the House. I don't know if folks here remember that, but I do because it fascinated, given everything I've said here, fascinated the heck out of me. In which the excuse me, Democrats were doing a gun control sit-in in the House, and when the cameras in the House were shut down to not broadcast it, the people doing the sit-in used their phones to bypass the cameras and just document it and reach out to people in a variety of different ways. And I happened to stumble across that watching House Democrats use their phones to live stream their protest. And I can't remember what hour it was, but this was late. I mean, I remembered like deliberately staying up late to watch this because I knew I was watching a new kind of technological moment in which these people in the House were saying, you know what, press, you think you can shut down and shut us out, but you can't. You don't have control of this narrative right now. We do with our little phones. That's fascinating. And that's some of what we're watching now. And we can come back to this at the end. And actually, we can talk about this in the Q&A as well. What I'm talking about here is clearly bound up with the fact that the press, the mainstream press, is also having an interesting moment as to what they can and can't do and want to do and won't do and how much power they do or don't have. It's the other half of the story is that they do not have the power that they assume they have. What they are doing or not doing is yet another thing that we could talk about, but clearly part of what's happening with this technological shift is that the mainstream media is finding itself not at the center of the story anymore, or certainly not for now. And they're not quite sure what to do about that. And some of what they're choosing to do about that, some parts of the mainstream media, is not particularly helpful right now. But at any rate, so it was the 2016 gun control moment happening in real time that really fascinated me. I've talked before, and I'm not going to go in great detail. I can't really see what's going on in chat. I've moved my notes up over it, but I did see Telegraph sort of come up. So someone certainly knows. How can I do this without mentioning the Telegraph? That was one of the moments when I first came across this, was researching the impact of the Telegraph in my most recent book, In the Field of Blood, because it stunned people as a form of technology that just fundamentally changed how politics worked, particularly from the national center to the nation at large. And when you read newspapers from the late 1840s, and you see people, particularly the editors of newspapers, commenting on how shocking it was to have access that was that quick, that in a very short amount of time someone could say something, and within an hour people could be hearing it at other parts of the nation, or hearing it, reading it, getting access to it in other parts of the nation. That was shocking to people. I have a quote here from 1846 from a New York newspaper from 1846, and you can feel in the quote the excitement. The editor said, "Washington is as near to us now as our uptown wards. We can almost hear through the telegraph members of Congress as they speak." Shocking, right? So close. And part of what that did was make it harder for people in Washington to control that conversation, because it used to be a closed community. It used to be that the people in Congress knew who was doing the reporting and could talk to them and influence them and shape what came out of Washington. And suddenly with the Telegraph, there are people from different states all over the country, unknown, sitting in a gallery watching what's happening, telegraphing it out to the country. And the politicians had no control over that process. So that was shocking to them. The other thing that happened, of course, is that you could not speak with different audiences with different voices, right? That if you said something in the North that the Telegraph could instantly make it be heard everywhere. So it was much harder, particularly in this period we're talking about, late 1840s and then the 1850s, much harder for people to say anything about anything North and South, particularly slavery, without the people on the other part of the Union knowing about it. So, for example, there was a Northern congressman who went home and I believe referred to Southerners in Congress as barbarians. And then a Southerner stood up not that long after in Congress and said, how could these men who profess to abhor and condemn us up north make the acquaintance of slaveholders, salute them as equals, and cordially grasp their hands as friends in Washington? So how can you say that in Massachusetts and then come back here to Washington and think we're your friends, we're going to join together and we're all going to politic together and join in shared cause? Doesn't work so well. And that was a new wrinkle in, again, national politics, the political process brought about by the Telegraph. The civil rights era, right? The 1960s, again, another wrinkle, the technological wrinkle that just shifted things. And in this case, in a particularly dramatic way, there is an article in the Atlantic called When the Revolution Was Televised by Alexis, I guess it's Madrigal, Madrigal. And it talks about the major impact that TV coverage of what was going on with civil rights protests had on the movement as a whole, on people who were involved with it, and people who were watching. This is a quote from that article. The capacity to see themselves, both figuratively and literally, as political actors was something long denied Black activists in the South, where local papers generally refused to cover Black protest. Imagine the impact that that would have. Suddenly, you can see, literally see yourself and others with you taking part in acts of protest. That would have a tremendous impact. That's like in the Revolutionary era when newspapers began printing what was happening in other cities and other colonies and ultimately other states as far as acts of protest were concerned. And suddenly people, wasn't necessarily fast, but still, people in New York could find out what was happening in Virginia and they could say, look what they're doing with their act of protest. And either we are doing something similar or we should do something similar. So technology as a way to connect people is important. But in this case, with civil rights, technology as a way for people to understand what people are doing, to see it and to put themselves in that picture. That's a major, major influence of technology as well. And, generally speaking, I think this is a good thing. It can cause complications, as it did with the Telegraph during a sectional crisis. It can also, I mean, we don't yet know how this will play out, but given AI and all of the ways in which technology is doing bizarre things now, some of which we know about and some of which we don't, I can't predict ways in which this will dramatically complicate things. Someone will find some way to complicate it in the hope of getting an advantage from it. I don't know what that will be. That will be something to be aware of. That will be something to think about. Technology can be weaponized, right? So it can be useful to democracy. It could be a tool for democracy. It can be weaponized, and it can be weaponized in different ways by who knows who. And who knows how that will have an impact either on what we see just as Americans, what we see, what we hear, what we think, and what conclusions we draw, and what we believe to be the truth. And in this case, in the case of technology, it can be a very small number of people having a really large impact, right? It can be a small number of people, of employees somewhere, that can potentially have a large impact in ways that we can ponder, we can think about. We don't absolutely know what that outcome would be. So viral disinformation, which we already are knowing and talking about, that also is something that could potentially shape some of what's going on now. But right now we're more in a moment, particularly with campaigning, that it's opening things up. I suppose we will need to watch to see the major ways in which it's going to complicate things, and then watch people in real time adapt to those complications and try and get around them and figure out ways to continue to use the tool without falling into some kind of a hole of a problem. So at any rate, the larger point here, moving my notes here, my larger point here is just that we are, once again, as we are in this particular election, in many ways, at a newish kind of a moment where things are happening in real time. We are watching them. I'm sitting here talking about the positive components of this. And certainly the Harris campaign is taking advantage of what appear to be the positive aspects of this new-ish or using new-ish technologies in new ways moment. Again, as ever, I talk about one of the things to think about that I raised towards the end of my History Matters conversations is often just be aware of the fact that this is happening, that this is new, and that this will be, not even might be, I was about to say might, will be shaping what you see and what you think, and that we need to be aware of that. Right now, it's mostly a positive story, but we need to watch for it. The other thing that will be interesting to watch for, again, and this feels very generational, is that the Democrats and the Harris campaign have jumped on this bandwagon full force. And again, they're in a distinctive moment for them. They came in very, very late as a campaign. The election is very close. The convention very close. They're in a weird situation, and so they, by definition, would have to innovate. And technology has helped them to do this. On the other side, they're still kind of figuring out what they want to do and how they want to do it. And in a way, the flip side of this, they're having press conferences, which are really kind of rallies more than anything else because people aren't really asking questions, right? The press isn't mostly asking questions. It's more airtime on TV and Donald Trump talking more than anything else. So in that case, you're using very old technologies and you're using old terminology. It's a press conference. Is it? I don't know. I might not call what we're seeing a press conference. So in that case, it's hiding under old things in the hope that we won't actually interrogate them very much and think to ourselves, wait, that's not really a press conference, whatever it is we're watching, and that actually matters and should affect how we do or don't see it. We're almost out of time. I'll just make one last point, and then we can come back to it when during the Q&A. But the fact that the press, generally speaking, right now, and I might come back to this topic, the press has been a part of this story in a way that they aren't necessarily always for weeks and weeks and weeks. And first it was, Biden has to drop out, Biden has to drop out, and every media outlet on the left and people getting angry because the press seemed to be trying to create events and not report on events. And now we have a different side of that story, which is Harris has to give a press conference. Harris has to talk to us. Harris should be giving us interviews. And what Harris is doing is speaking directly to us through technology and not necessarily giving the press what they want. Now, there are all kinds of reasons, and we could talk about them, why she may or may not be doing it. And certainly one of them is that what the press is doing right now feels poorly adapted to this moment, shall we say, if what you're trying to do is just cover what's going on. It feels as though the press is happily proceeding along a very old model about press conferences, both sides, horse races, and everything else that typical elections are. And we are so not in a typical election in any way that is a warping maneuver. That is no longer a useful way of operating here. It's a warping maneuver, and it certainly is of no help to Harris, who even when she has walked over to reporters, a moment that certainly I saw somewhere online in which she did walk over to a group of reporters. And I think one of the things she said was, "What you got?" Right? Ask me questions. And they asked her about Trump. So this is not a moment in which the conventional press, it has, whether they want to adapt to it or not, I'm not going to say, but they certainly haven't. They're operating according to old rules that are benefiting Trump and not really necessarily benefiting Harris. And so she's adapting to the moment by using these technological tools to just run around them and get to the public in another way. Again, this is the sort of stuff that makes me jump up and down in my seat, because it's political improvisation in real time in concrete ways. And we don't know what the outcome will be, which is a little terrifying. I've been writing about that recently, about not knowing about outcomes. Contingency. I have actually been writing about contingency. This is a great example of that. And not knowing what's going to happen is exciting. It's always particularly terrifying as well. But in the case of technology, very concrete. And in a way, that's why it's particularly interesting to watch and to think about. And this is what I encourage all of us to do, to think about as we're watching it happen, the fact that this is having a direct impact on democracy, the working of democracy, a democratic, small d, election. We need to be aware of what isn't happening, aware of the ways in which it is or isn't happening, and aware of how that's affecting what we're seeing and what we're thinking about it, because it certainly matters. And there's not that much time between now and the election. So we need to be aware of that and thinking about that now. Okay, I'm moving my notes away. I'm 1 minute early. I was gonna say, I beat the mug queries here. So for those of you who are here and are new, this is the 229th episode. And what I've done every week is have a mug that in one way or another reflects on the theme of what we're talking about. I do not have 229 mugs, but I have a lot. I have another mug, which I tend to pull out when I talk about the press. And I'm sure I must have used this one before, but it's not the one I normally pull out, which I think says something like "on the media" or something, on caffeine. It's from the show On the Media, the NPR show. This is not that one. This is from when I actually was on C-SPAN, C-SPAN Book TV. And what's interesting about it is, in this case, it was just a conversation, right? So this was like C-SPAN in many ways is like, here's a camera, and now we're going to show you what's happening in real time. That's a kind of technology that it could be very useful, that is not the kind that I've been talking about here, which is maneuvered and watched over and curated and everything else that you can say about media. So I suppose this is partly a thank you C-SPAN moment, but also, let me move my screen over here, but also On the Media, and for this crowd, Book TV and books, thumbs up.
Coffee.
And coffee, yes. Okay.
Used to be C-SPAN Books and Coffee.
That's true.
All right, so we only have 11. That's good. That's manageable. No, keep adding questions, kids. I'm just kidding. Okay. All right. Our good friend Sydney is with us. I'm not sure, Sydney, if you're going back to college this week or next. I know it's soon. Sydney asks, how do you think this election will go down in history? More specifically, how will it be taught in the future?
Well, how it will be taught, we don't know yet, because we don't know how it's going to end up. It will be taught as an interesting moment in the evolution of democracy, because it is an election, whatever your politics are, it's an election in which democracy is being tested in a really direct way. It's an election in one way or another in which we are voting on democracy, and if and how we support it, or if and how we don't. So certainly, if that's part of what the story will be, which I think that's a pretty safe bet, that what I'm talking about here today, the technology angle, will certainly be part of that story. Obviously, there are any number of angles that people will have to talk about with this. They'll have to talk. Well, here's an interesting question. I don't necessarily have a lot to say on it, but I've seen a lot of people talking about the fact that, do we really need campaigns to last as long as they normally last? Can we maybe just have 2 or 3 months, right, of a campaign? Is it so bad? Do we have to have all of that run up? So I don't know in what ways this will be talked about in future as not just testing democracy, but maybe reshaping democratic elections in some way. Maybe sort of having the voting public make some hard vote supported calls on what they do or don't want the nation to be in an extreme way. That'll be part of it. I have to say, contingency, right? The extreme contingency of this moment, and the fact that we can sit here, I can sit here and honestly say I have no idea how this is going to turn out at all, right? I truly don't. I last night, yesterday, I had a Instagram conversation with Heather Cox Richardson, and we both, two political historians, were like, we don't know. Like, we don't know, right? We don't know what's going to happen. We don't. Like, we're watching like everybody else. That's not, every election has a component of that. This has an extreme degree of that, in part because of the ways in which democracy is really being tested. So all of those things, I think, will be part of how this is taught. But in the end, how it's taught will have a lot to do with how it ends up. And so we are still waiting to see how that's going to end up. But there's certainly, this deserves like a whole chapter in a textbook, right? There's so much going on here in so many ways, not just politically, in every other way, socially, technologically, all, as far as race is concerned, as far all kinds of ways, that this election, in a way, it could almost be, now I'm speaking as a teacher, a unit in and of itself to talk about the ways in which elections work and don't, and how each component in this election has worked before and now is working differently. It would be a great thing to kind of pull apart as a way to get at what elections really are, and then to focus on this moment as an interesting, strange moment that stands out.
I imagine a lot of colleges will have a semester-long elective course just looking at 2016 to 2020. I really think it would be a semester. I mean, if there's a Taylor Swift semester course, there's got to be one for this.
You could. There are many like bite-sized morsels. You know what this makes me think of? It reminds me of being, I guess when I was in 8th grade, maybe, and taking history, and we would like make it up to World War II and then not make it past that. It was like, oh, well, we ran out of time. And ever since then, I remember at the time thinking, wait, other stuff happened. How come we only made it up to World War II?
Korea, Vietnam, Watergate. Like, we never got to do that till I got to college. It was
right. No, me neither. So yeah, we ran out of history. So anyway, that's a whole different question, is the ways in which what happens and how it happens and when it happens and the ultimate impact on it shapes the overall, this isn't what Sydney asked, but shapes the overall narrative and what gets focused on. Again, that's probably some of what will come out of this moment too.
Okay, Bill R. I'm not sure if Bill is new.
I see you, Tim. I'm not going to repeat it, but I see you.
Uh-oh.
It's a 1776 song reference. But
oh, he's going to try and make you sing.
I know.
Okay, Bill R. asks, can you compare today's voter suppression to past efforts? How is technology affecting this?
Right. And that's definitely something to watch and keep your eye on and call it out. Call it out locally. Talk about it when you see it on a local level. Check your registration a lot, right? Make it a weekly practice. Check. And my recommendation would be to make it a like every Monday night. You check your registration, since the election will be Tuesday. You'll know really close to when it happens that you haven't somehow been purged. So suppression always, in one way or another, has been, well, always, a lot, has been a way in which some people with power try to keep other people, particularly when the demographics are against them, from having something to say. And obviously you can talk all day and night about what has happened in the past in the South, and poll taxes and tests and any number of other ways in which there were massive organized attempts to keep Black people from voting in the South. We are now watching different attempts, and sometimes they are masked as, preventing cheating, preventing widespread cheating. Like, we don't want those illegal aliens to vote. It's like, well, that's actually not a problem. It doesn't happen, and it already is illegal. So, you know, it's convenient to mask some of these suppression efforts as safety measures, but in the end, a lot of them are just attempts to gain control. And I hate to use the word rigging, but by rigging the system in some way, by making it harder to get to polling places, by having fewer polling places, by closing down the window of time within which you can vote. I read somewhere yesterday, I think it's in Texas, that they closed down. Uh, is it Austin? Someone might know this better than I, but on a college campus, a massive college campus that usually has tens of thousands of people, students voting, and they closed it down. Like, oh, guess we're not going to use that. So that's the kind of voter suppression that, and who knows? I did not look that up, and I didn't look to UT Austin. There
No,
we
it's
go.
been verified. Yep.
UT Austin. I didn't look up to see what the excuse for that is, what they're claiming is the reason for doing that. But yeah, voter suppression is going to be a major thing, and we need to again watch it, point to it, call it out, and push against it. What that means, in one way or another, is people are aware of the fact that the demographics are against them. They know that in a free and fair election, they would lose. And what you do in that situation is try and keep people from voting, because the fewer people that vote, the fewer people probably will be voting for the other side, given that the majority is with the other side. And then you can rig control of that system and keep power for yourself. Obviously, blatantly anti-democratic. There are any number of ways in which there are, this gets back to an election that is over democracy, ways in which anti-democratic maneuvers are being called into place, and some of them are sneaky, and some of them are happening on a state legislative level, and some of them are happening again in polling places in one way or another. But we need to be watching for this, first of all, locally where we are, to see what's happening and call it out, but then more broadly. There feels as though right now we're in a moment where there's a lot going on a lot of levels, and not a lot of attention being paid to some of it. And there needs to be more attention being paid to some of it. This is one way, UT, it did actually make it through, UT Austin. But yeah, so in a way, this is certainly not the first time there's been an attempt at voter suppression to keep certain key demographics away or out of polling places, or to discount their votes. I will say, while we're talking about this, that if and when, not if, when you go to vote, be aware of all of the things, like I've seen people online say, if you're handed a ballot and it has a mark on it at all, a pencil mark, give it back and get a clean one, because that will allow them to basically disregard your ballot. So, we're going to all need to be watching on a level that we shouldn't have to in a functional democracy, about how votes are being cast and when they're being cast. But yeah, that's voter suppression is the proper phrase to apply to what people are trying to do right now. And if they are trying to prevent people from voting, it shows that they know that they are not necessarily winning, and it shows how important your vote is if they're trying to take it away, which means you must cast that vote.
Yep. Our governor just issued a executive order to codify, voter discrepancies or whatever he called it. I put it in the chat, but it's basically like trying to, yeah, it's absurd. Okay, Bill's question was a good one. Kim has this question. She says, how do we get news media standards required in middle and high school curriculum so generations know how to grapple with the constant bias, disinformation, and propaganda? I discussed this with my curriculum director. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem to be a priority.
Now, I can't answer that, but maybe Annie, you can talk to that.
Yeah, we've been through this in Virginia. So you have to make parents and all the voters aware of when your state standards are up for revision, and they will play all kinds of crazy tricks. But at some point, your social studies standards should be revised. In Virginia, it's by law every 7 years. I know Texas had a similar thing, but then they punted it for 2 more years. And so there's been a lot of unusual things going on since 2016, as you can imagine. But when we went through this very contentious battle a couple of years ago, it was all over the national news. because we pushed back hard and we actually got most of what we wanted put back in, but it was very difficult. But the way we did it was we got the word out to parents that there are hearings that you can go to the Board of Education and tell them what you think before they vote on it. And we had hundreds showing up. And
Wow.
in our case, they took the history of labor movements out at the last minute, which was really the dumbest thing they did. But a middle school history teacher was married to a Teamster, and she went home and told her husband. And he had hundreds of Teamsters showing up at all these hearings. And that's when they realized they had lost the battle of public opinion. And that's when they started quietly putting things back in to ask us to.
That's what you just said, the battle for public opinion. The public needs to know and needs to have an opinion and express it loudly.
It was loud.
Yeah, and that's it.
That
So
was their base, right?
Yeah.
The everyman. They were like, oh, we just poked the bear.
That matters, right? I say this in all kinds of different ways, right? Our government, our system of government is grounded on public opinion. And when it was created, that was the assumption, like, ooh, monarchies, not so much, but in a small r, in a republic, in a democratic republic, public opinion matters intensely, and that's still true. And we forget that. We feel like one in a bazillion, and what will our opinion do? But when people come together and are loud about their opinions, that can really matter. It's supposed to matter, right? That's how our system of government is supposed to work. So this is a great reminder of that.
Yeah. I'm going to put an article that was written about our fight in the chat that might help inspire other states on how to organize at a grassroots level.
And another Joanne just put in Teaching Texas, a podcast on what happened in Texas. So see, look at these. I have to say, the History Matters community, man.
Yeah. We were in Texas earlier this summer. That was a very interesting experience. That's all I'm going to say on that right now. It says, okay, Daniel, who's with us quite frequently. Hi, Daniel. Daniel Abramovich asks, folks have been making fun of the absurd things right-wingers say for a long time now. Tendori Farquad, I hope I didn't mess that up, seemed immune. Why is it finally working, not complaining?
Why is
it finally working to call out the absurd things that they're saying? Like, it seems like recently they started just calling it out more, but he cites Tendori for quad seemed immune. I'm not
I'm not sure what I don't know. I mean, haven't been measuring over time. It could be that part of the reason why it's working now is explicitly because things are unsettled. So people are kind of watching and listening in a way that they might not normally be. Despite the fact that some of the press is acting as though this is a normal election, and that all of the candidates are normal candidates, people can see and feel that that's not generally the case. And so maybe part of the answer is as simple as that, is that people are paying closer attention, and whether or not they're using the word contingency, they have a sense that what the heck is going on here and what's going to happen. Certainly there are more people now, I think, that understand the moment that we're in, right? So I've been howling for years that we're in this moment of contingency where things could all go down, right? And I don't mean that to be alarmist. I've just wanted people to understand not to take things for granted, that they have to be aware that this is a moment where we really have to be watching. And it feels as though finally a greater number of people are acknowledging and understand the degree to which we are really in a moment in which we don't know what's going to happen. I think American exceptionalism gets in the way of that, and did for a while, very much so, right? We're always fine. We've always been okay. We're going to be fine with this too. It's always good. We're the United States. We're better than everyone else. Our system of government's better than everyone else's. It'll all be good. And I was like howling into, spitting into the wind, saying, don't, it's going to blind you to what's happening right in front of your nose. And I sort of feel like fewer people nowadays are saying it's all fine, it's always fine. And although I don't like the fact that we have to be there, it's good that we're there, because we need to be awake and alert to what's going on. And so maybe that's part of the answer to that question.
Yeah, I don't know if you saw, Joanne, the Harris campaign issued what they called a media advisory yesterday, before Trump's press conference. Did you see this?
I think I did. I don't remember what it said, but it
I
was
thought it was
like,
a meme at first. I thought it was
right,
fake. And
right.
I read later, like, no, she really did that. And I thought it was brilliant. No matter
It
what
was
side of the
something,
political spectrum you're on, she basically said, my opponent's going to have a press conference today. Here's what he's going to say. He's going to dredge up these old things. He's going to tell X number of lies about how many people were at this rally or how many, she just basically broke down everything he was going to say an hour before I was like, wow.
and I agree with
Kind of
you that
smart.
I looked because I was like, wow, that's real, right?
That's real.
And so that's part of what's going on here too, which is again, political historian, fascinating. Generally speaking, like when you look at my guys in the 1850s, right? And you have Southerners in Congress who are breaking rules and being violent, carrying guns and knives and doing whatever they want to do to protect slavery. And then you had the Northerners, for a long time at least, in Congress saying, no, we must protect the institution, the glory, the dignity of Congress. You are working, and always the North acted in that role, like standing up for order and institutions, which often is what the Democratic Party has done, right? Rules, you can't do that. It's against the rules. We are the party of, keeping things orderly. And the folks on the right have been saying, like, no, we're going to do what we want to do. And the people on the left say, but you can't do that. All right, well, we're doing it now. This is a very different moment, right? When the Democratic Party is what do I want to call it? They're just out, in a way, pushing back with humor and bluntness. I don't think well, I'm not even going to go into this, but the degree to which some on the right are saying they're bullies, they're bullying us, the Democrats are bullying us. And the reason they're saying that in part is because it's so ingrained that that's not what Democrats do. They take the high road. They never do that. It's the right. It's Republicans who tend to play that game. And now that that's suddenly not the game that's being played, that's like my Southerners in the second half of the 1850s saying, wait a minute, like, we're the guys who are, running
Bullies.
around being nasty. You can't be nasty. So anyway, another way in which this is an interesting moment, and that kind of protest that they're bullying us, the sort of, what do I want to call it? Chutzpah to complain about that after, many, 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 many years of doing that. This just is a show in which whatever's happening on the left in the Democratic Party, there's a real shift in the ethos of what's going on in that party now too, as in addition to generationally.
All right. Robert Hurst says TikTok serves as a news source. Are news sites referenced, or is it a cut and paste of the news story in the TikTok realm that you were discussing?
I do not know that answer.
I think it's a mixture. I don't go on TikTok very often unless someone sends me something. Like my younger nieces, every once in a while they'll send me something, and then I'll look at it and then I'll explain to them why it is or is not historically accurate or real news. If it's fake news, that's really a big extent of mine. And I don't have time to sit and look at funny babies laughing, which much as it would be fun. It seems like
Right.
about 80% of TikTok is just videos of someone's baby laughing, which is joyful, but
I'm
so
not on TikTok.
Robert.
I like, as it is, I always feel vaguely ridiculous because it's like, for a while, I was like on Twitter, on Mastodon, on Spoutable,
I couldn't
on,
do it all.
everything. I was on everything. And now I've sort of winnowed it down. But TikTok, I like couldn't add. So again, this means I'm an old. But I don't know the answer to that question. And I would guess you're right, Annie, is that it's kind of probably a mix of things. What was I going to see? I just saw something here I wanted to. Oh, right. Kim said, right, that the right is continuing. They're not stopping their bullying, right? Immigrants, trans folks, whatever, whoever. They just don't want the Democrats to be doing it to them. So the exposure of imbalance and the fact that what has been imbalanced in some ways is a little more balanced, and that some people are upset that the balance has been shifted in a way that they don't like. Again, all of this fits into the improvisational moment that we're in politically, for sure.
Yeah. Candell Richmond has a question, actually two that I'm going to combine. And I don't know, Candell, if you're new, but if you are, welcome. Candell says, I'm curious what your thoughts are on the correlation, if any, between candidates who are early adopters of new technology to convey their message, such as JFK with TV, Obama using social media, Trump using Twitter. And then she also is asking, alternatively, are there stories of those who were early adopters of new tech that weren't successful? So how does that play out?
Well, I
Kind of a
think the first
question.
half, that if you're an early adopter and you figure out how to do it, you have a big advantage, right? And we saw that with Obama, you know, and I think I mentioned this in the last week or two about how for a little while I was like, not another email from Obama. I was like, what world am I in, right? It was like, what? Like, how am I getting emails from Barack Obama? Because it was such a new, weird thing. So sometimes that works to your advantage. It's absolutely true that that could backfire, but I don't, right now, I can't say that I have specific examples of when it has backfired. I'm sure there are some because, you know, loose cannon is in a way, a technological metaphor for a reason, right? Because you don't necessarily know how things are going to slingshot around and come back and hit you. That's the risk with doing this sort of thing. But there can be a big payoff as well, and that's in a way that's definitely what we're watching. What did I just see? There was something that someone said here. Oh no, basic question. Someone just said, where am I on social media? I'm on Threads probably more than anything else right now, and also Blue Sky. And I every once in a while sort of poke into Twitter to say something political, but I guess I would say I'm on Threads and Blue Sky more than anything else right now. I have not, I am, as talking about technology, have not found the perfect combination of things that makes me happy. I'm also on Instagram with Heather. So Heather and I try and have not managed once a week to have our conversations. We had one yesterday. We're going to try to have one on Saturday. But anyway, that's the answer to that question. Okay.
All right. Now this says Beth, but I don't think it's Rabbi Beth. I think it's another Beth. She asked, when you talk about Field of Blood, you reference the Northerners standing up to the violent threats from Southerners in Congress. I keep thinking about over the last couple of weeks, do you think that's what's going on with reactions to Vance as well as Trump and to some extent Elon Musk?
With people standing up to
Violent threats.
yeah. Oh yeah. And part of it is, you know, and this is not this I'm going to go all the way back. You're going to humor me. I can go all the way back to the American Revolution, and the British making fun of Americans with the song Yankee Doodle. Yankee Doodle, right? Stuck a feather in his cap and called it macaroni. That's making fun of Americans. Macaroni is a fop. And what that song really was about was these, you know, crazy dumb Yankees. Like they stick a feather in their hat and they think, ooh, look at me. Like I'm a macaroni, I'm a fop, I'm in high fashion. That was meant to make fun of the colonials, the crude colonials. And immediately what the colonists did was turn it around and own it and take it as their song. Say, yeah, okay, fine. We are Yankee Doodle. You know, come for us. That's us. What are you going to do about it? And in some ways, we see a little of that happening now too, where Vance attacks. Well, what kind of woman has he not attacked at this point? But whatever it is, you know, single cat ladies, postmenopausal women, you know, whoever it is, he's decided he's going to attack as a woman. Immediately, what happens is, you know, I have never ever publicly announced proudly that I am postmenopausal. And in the last 3 days, I'm like, postmenopausal women for Harris, you know. So it's the same spirit as Yankee Doodle, right? It's like, yeah, okay, fine, you know, toss it out there, dude. It is. That's exactly who we are, and that's can be a really effective way of dealing with people who are trying to attack you with that kind of bullying language, is to take it and own it, turn it around, you know. And I think that's also the Harris communications people are really, really interesting, and they're doing all kinds of things that, just like Annie, you and I were saying before, you read something and you're like, wait, is that real? That doesn't often happen, particularly in presidential campaigns. This is more like that, right? It's like, okay, fine, yeah, you want to make, I was going to say, I won't use this language. You want to really like tick off menopausal women, postmenopausal women, single cat ladies, whoever it is, you do it.
Alienate us all you like.
Right, and alienate all of us. We're right here for it, and we're gonna take it and give it right back. So yeah, that's one way to deal with bullying, right? Is to say you actually think that's bad? Like, you really think I'm ashamed of? I mean, in the last week, I talked about being postmenopausal. I think in the relation of tampon Tim, I was talking about like being a kid and menstruating for the first time on social media, right? So just in the last week, the amount of time I've spent saying, yeah, I'm not ashamed. Why should I be
Natural, part of life.
ashamed? Right. You keep tossing it off. And what you're showing is that I'm not good. Well, I was going to say, you're weird. You're
Yeah.
weird.
I put it in the chat, but I'm sure it went back too fast when you were talking about the menopausal women for Harris call. All I could think about is Nora Ephraim had this book called I Hate My Neck.
Yes.
When it came out, I was too young to get that joke, but my sister kept talking about this book because she's older and she was going through it at the time.
Yeah.
And she would go on and on. I'm like, that's a horrible title for a book.
Oh.
Then when I got a little older, I was like, she's a genius.
I know. That's exactly true. You're like, oh yeah.
Sydney, in 20, 30 years, you're going to love that book, Sydney.
Yes, trust us.
Until then, you just keep having fun in college, sweetie. We love you. All right. That was a great question, Beth. Thank you. I needed that today. All right. It's exactly 11. We have
James
7
says
more.
he's a childless cat lord and proud.
Or bird owners.
I one of my social media platforms, it says childless bird lady. So yeah. So yeah.
All right. We still have 7 questions left and it's 11 o'clock exactly. So what do we want?
For now, let's keep going and see what happens.
Okay. All right. So our friend Deb Pomerantz, who's been with us for a long time, says it seems like a combination of technological shift and declining revenue available to traditional news media are reducing the quality and accuracy of news reporting. Less sources, less editors, less fact checkers, etc. Any ideas on how quality can be maintained in the new era?
Well, that I don't know. And that add to that the fact that there are fewer local media outlets now.
That's what I miss.
Right. So all of that goes together. I don't have the answer to that. That's another phenomenon right now that we could toss that into this bundle of things that's shaping how politics is or isn't being reported. I don't know how to do that, because I really do think, in a broader sense than this election, our media world is in transformation in some ways, and a lot of that has to do with money and where it's going and where it isn't going, and who's paying for things and who's not paying for things. And, we see actually politics affecting that, right? People saying, I'm not going to subscribe to fill in the publication anymore because what the heck are they doing? They're not, I don't believe in what they're doing. So that, I think that falls into the contingency umbrella as to where this will shake out. But we're watching that begin to shake out in real time during a really crucial election. I don't have the answer to that, but that's a huge part of what's going on right now.
Yeah. Okay, Dave Aree, one of our great friends, he has a good question here. He says, assuming that Taylor Swift and Beyonce advocate for Harris, well, I think Beyonce already did. She let her use that song Freedom for free, which is huge. But if Swift and Beyonce advocate for Harris Waltz to get young women out to vote, is there any historical precedent for popular influencers backing national politicians at the presidential level in the past? That's a good question, Dave.
It is a good question. It's in degree kind of unprecedented, only because now the reach and power of both of those two people, of Beyonce and Taylor Swift, and the base of people that they reach, and that, an international group of people who she touches in one way or another, the numbers are off the charts. I mean, I think generally speaking, roping sort of entertainment-y figures into political campaigns is a long-standing thing. I think now what's different is, influencer is not the same as entertainment, popular person. These are people who aren't just entertainers, but are honest to goodness um, influencers of society in some way or another, particularly those two, and particularly right now, Taylor Swift seems to me, but Beyonce as well. So as far as, again, in this kind of moment, with this kind of a media reach and this kind of an impassioned, enormous base of fans in this way, I'm not sure. I can't march through all of history, presidential electoral history, but again, technology is making this have a different kind of a power and a different kind of a reach.
Okay. You want to do one more?
Yeah, let's do one more.
Okay, Freda from Erie, PA asks, she says she heard you and Heather on Instagram talking about the Trump press conferences. She says she feels like you two are even getting sucked in to be negatively fascinated by what TFG is doing. How do we stop all the media from doing that?
Interesting. Well, we wanted to just more than anything else say it, in part because until very recently, nobody was. Right? That if until very recently, that weird stuff was going on, and the press kind of wasn't reporting on it being weird. I think now we've kind of crossed a line. I think Lawrence O'Donnell helped as well. So I wouldn't say that Heather and I are getting sucked in, but I do feel like we felt the need to just bluntly say it. Like, this isn't normal, and people are treating it as though it's normal, and it isn't. Right? There's nothing about this that's remotely normal. But it's true that to stop and to say that in one way, you're sort of casting, I suppose, paying attention to it. But it would be just as harmful if nobody called it out as it is for someone to say, look. So it's an interesting question, and it does get at a question of balance, right? I don't think it should be not talked about, but I also don't think it should be the star of the news, right? It should, well, kind of along the lines of, I suppose, what the Harris people did, right? Well, this is happening, and this is what he's going to say, and it's going to be weird. Let's move on. People just need to be aware of the fact that this is not a normal moment in any way politically, and that whatever he's having and whatever he's calling them, it's not a normal press conference. It isn't. So someone has to say, even though people are acting like it is, it isn't. So now what? What does that mean? If we're in this moment with that kind of candidate doing these kinds of things and pretending like this is normal, but it isn't, this is what Heather and I were talking about. So then what? Right? What do you do? We didn't have the answer to this question, but that's in a way what we were interested in talking about is, so what do you do with a moment like this when no matter, people are pretending like it's normal and it isn't, then what? What do you do? And that's a good, if not necessarily easily answered question.
Yeah. We have time for one more quick one because I really wanted the answer to this one.
Yes.
Okay, Ellen, who also has been with us a long time, asked when we talked about the campaigns going on and on and on, and could we have a shorter, like Francesca said, it's only 6 weeks in the UK. She wanted to know, is there a way to limit the political ads not being able to start until the actual year of the election, or is that a violation of the First Amendment?
Oh, I don't know about that. I mean,
Interesting.
it's a very good question. I mean, I would say, with no knowledge about the legal logistics of this, it seems as though it should be possible to put up barriers, right? Before this date, you can't do then, right? That people will be like, well, but this isn't quite that. It's different. And, people will find ways to run around the barriers, but still, it might be possible to at least try to bound things in. And if that's in the same way that the pandemic taught people that they can work from home and that they don't have to have the same exact work schedule, it could be that this election is going to help us learn we don't have to have the exact same way in which elections play out, and we can do it differently, and we can shorten the amount of lead time, and that could be a very good thing, because this is, we need to have time for candidates to say what they're about, for us to evaluate them, for us to hear them, for them to speak to us, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But do we need it for a whole year ahead of an election? Or can we really do that in a couple of months? You know, it seems to me that the latter might be a fine alternative, but at least now people are asking the question. I don't remember that question necessarily being asked as seriously before the current moment.
I like it though.
I
All
know.
right.
I think it's an interesting question. Okay, we
Um,
should probably stop so that we can have the after party. Um, okay, so um, here's what will happen now. So some of you are here for the first time, and even if you're not, it's exactly. Thank you, James. It's time to poof. So what we're going to do now is go to the after party. What that means is that we will no longer be recording. I remember once I said we will turn off the cameras. It was like, so then what will we be doing? I know. We will no longer be recording. Um, and so we can be even freer and easier than we have been for the last hour in talking about what we choose to talk about. If you beamed in through the NCHE website, just stay right where you are and poof, you will be in the after party. If you are watching us on Facebook, you need to leave Facebook and go to ncheteach.org/conversations. That's ncheteach.org/conversations. And then you too, poof, will be in the after party. And I just realized I should have said before when I said I'm on Threads and Blue Sky, and I have a YouTube channel. I just only recently made it. So I'm on there too. At any rate, we will head off into the after party. Before we do, I do want to say, someone is talking about how the volume is low. Okay.
I think it might just be on their end, or I can
On
hear
your
you.
end. Okay. Too late now. At any rate, I do want to thank everyone for coming here and asking questions and engaging in the conversation of democracy as we have for now 229 weeks. I'm so proud that I remembered that number this week. It matters a lot for all the reasons we talked about today, noticing things, talking, asking questions, calling things out, coming together as a group to talk about these things, and then we can all go out into our lives and have conversations and ask questions in ways that will be useful. If we're talking and asking questions, that's useful. That's democracy. So thank you for being here for that. Thank you to John, who used to be Jessica, and Annie, and Claire, and NCHE, and Jessica, for being here and making this possible. I hope that everybody has a wonderful week. And boy, we're going to have stuff to talk about next weekend because, oh, and I will figure this out. I'm actually going to be in Idaho next Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. I will find a way to get to either I will have to, and I don't know, maybe I can do it live or I will do it in advance, but there's no way I'm not speaking up. And I will try and figure out a way to do it live. I'm going to be at a Conversations with Exceptional Women event that we're going to talk about democracy and sometimes women and other topics. So it'll be worthwhile. At any rate, we'll have a lot to talk about next week for sure. Have a good week. And I will, Annie the cheese. I will, I just saw that in chat. Annie the cheese waits for you. And I will see you guys in a week.